Captain Elias Grayson stood on the balcony of his modest cabin, gazing out at the horizon of New Earth. The sky was bathed in the soft light of a twin sunset, a serene reminder of the peace he had fought so hard to build after years of war. Once, he had been a legend, a hero to the galaxy. Now he was just a man trying to find solace in a quiet life that had eluded him for so long. The days of commanding fleets, leading armies, and making impossible decisions were behind him. He had earned his rest, hadn't he? A soft chime from his comm device broke his reverie. Elias stiffened, his hand instinctively reaching for the familiar weight of his blaster at his side, despite the fact that New Earth had been untouched by conflict for years. He activated the device, and the image of a familiar face flickered to life. It was Zora, his closest ally from the old days. Her dark eyes were filled with urgency, her expression a mix of fear and determination. "Elias, you need to get to the command center. Now." Zora's voice was tight with alarm. "We're under attack." The words hit Elias like a punch to the gut. He stared at her, unable to process what she was saying. New Earth had been a sanctuary for the survivors of humanity's wars, a place where the last remnants of their people had rebuilt in peace. Who could be attacking them now? By who? Elias asked, his voice cold with disbelief. "It's Lord Carrack," Zara said, her eyes flickering with the gravity of the situation. "He's come for us." The name struck Elias like a hammer. Lord Carrack was no mere warlord. He was the most feared conqueror in the galaxy, a creature of brutal intelligence and limitless ambition. He had crushed entire systems, bending alien races to his will. But humanity had been out of his reach, until now. The terror Carrack inspired was legendary, and now it seemed he had found his way to New Earth. Elias's mind raced. The galaxy's dark history had caught up with them faster than he ever imagined. But what was Carrack's interest in this peaceful corner of space? Was there something here he wanted? "I'll be there," Elias said, his voice steady despite the rising tide of panic in his chest. He left his cabin at a run, his boots pounding against the metal floor of the colony's corridors. As he reached the command center, the sight that awaited him sent a chill through his spine. The main screen displayed live footage of Carrack's fleet, a massive armada of sleek, terrifying warships, their dark hulls blotting out the stars. They were closing in fast. Zara was already at the console, coordinating defense efforts. Elias stepped up beside her, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the incoming data. The odds were grim. They were hopelessly outmatched. "Sir, we don't have enough firepower to hold them off," Zara said, her voice tight with frustration. Elias clenched his fists, a sense of responsibility surging through him. The people of New Earth had trusted him to protect them, to keep them safe. He couldn't let them fall into Carrack's hands. "Prepare the defense grid," he said, his voice a command. "We fight until the last." As the preparations were made, Elias's mind flicked back to his days as a soldier. The strategies, the battles, the bloodshed. But this wasn't just another skirmish. This was personal. Carrack had come for them, and Elias would make sure he regretted it. But in the heat of the chaos, Elias felt something else stir within him, something he hadn't felt in years, the faintest glimmer of hope. In the midst of this attack, an unexpected truth began to emerge. There was something about New Earth that Carrack wanted, something he had no way of anticipating, something that would change everything. His first strike hit the outer defense grid like a sledgehammer. The entire colony shuddered under the weight of the blast, sending sparks and smoke curling up into the air. Elias's mind was sharp, each command he gave more instinctive than the last. But despite his experience, he knew they were outmatched. Carrack's fleet was too powerful, too well organized, and New Earth's defenses, built for peaceful coexistence, were never designed to withstand an assault of this magnitude. Elias stood at the command center, his fists clenched as he watched the battle unfold on the main screen. Zara worked furiously at the console, rerouting power to the defensive cannons, but the reports were clear. They were losing ground. With every passing minute, Carrick's forces pushed deeper into their airspace. "We need more time," Ilias muttered to himself. "We need something, anything to tip the scales." Zora glanced over at him, her eyes grim. "Ilias, there's nothing more we can do. We can't hold them off forever." But something about the situation felt different, something that tugged at the edges of Elias's mind. There was a pull, an undeniable sensation that the attack wasn't just about New Earth. It was about him, the artifact. He had only realized its power a few moments ago, when he'd come into contact with it during the chaos. But now its presence was undeniable. It was there, deep inside him, coiling with potential. Without thinking, Ilias moved toward the back of the command center, his footsteps swift and determined. He could feel the artifact's pulse, resonating deep within his chest, as if it was calling to him. He had no time for hesitation. As a soldier, Ilias had learned that hesitation led to failure. He gripped the relic, now a part of him in some inexplicable way, and focused his mind. It was an ancient piece of technology, one that defied all logic. A low hum filled the room, barely audible over the din of alarms blaring across the colony's defenses. The air around Ilias began to shimmer, as if reality itself was bending to his will. The artifact responded, its hidden power flooding into him. Elias's body convulsed as the energy surged through his veins. His muscles tightened, and a blinding light enveloped him. His vision blurred, his breath ragged as his consciousness expanded, linked now to something far beyond his understanding. Images flashed before him. Visions of a forgotten empire, vast cities on once pristine worlds, a time when humanity ruled the stars with untold power. It was more than just power. It was purpose. The artifact's knowledge unfolded before Elias's mind's eye, offering him the strength to turn the tide of this war, to reshape the future. But with that power came a terrifying weight. The cost was steep, and Elias could feel it, the energy consuming him, tearing at his very being. His body threatened to buckle under the strain, but he refused to let go. The people of New Earth needed him. He had to end this now. With a sudden burst of energy, Elias released the power that had built inside him. The pulse shot out like a shockwave, slamming into Carrick's approaching fleet. The first wave of enemy ships reeled back, their shields flickering under the intensity of the force. The shockwave disrupted their systems, causing some ships to spiral out of control. Zora's eyes widened as she witnessed the display. "Elias," she breathed, a mixture of awe and fear in her voice. What did you just do?" Elias staggered, his knees almost buckling under the weight of the energy. He gasped for breath, his mind racing as he tried to regain control. The power had overwhelmed him in ways he hadn't anticipated, but the enemy had felt it. Carrick's forces were momentarily thrown into disarray. "We have a chance," Ilias muttered, his voice hoarse. "Now, we fight." But even as the enemy regrouped, Ilias knew this was only the beginning. The power that had surged through him had granted a victory, but the true battle was still ahead. The artifact's secrets were far from revealed, and Carrick wouldn't stop until he had it, until he had everything. Elias, now marked by the artifact's power, looked to the sky where Carrick's ships loomed, far from defeated. The war was just beginning, and Elias could already feel the price of the choices he was about to make. "We need to strike first," he said, voice steely with resolve. "This ends now." With that, Elias led his team out of the command center and into the heart of the war. The galaxy was on the edge of an unimaginable conflict, and the reluctant hero was finally beginning to understand the true nature of his mission. His powers were growing, and so were the stakes. The battle raged on, but Elias's momentary victory had given New Earth a brief reprieve. Carrick's fleet, though disoriented, was far from defeated. They regrouped, closing in once more, their firepower overwhelming even the enhanced defenses Elias had activated with the artifact. But now, there was something different in the air, something that had shifted irrevocably. Elias stood at the edge of the command center, his hands trembling from the aftermath of the power he had unleashed. The artifact's energy still coursed through his veins, but it was growing harder to control, a constant reminder of the terrible cost of the power it bestowed. Zara joined him, her eyes wary. "We've bought ourselves some time," she said, her voice tense. "But Carrick won't stop. He knows what he's after. We need to figure out what that is before he gets it." Elias's gaze hardened. "I know what he's after. He's after me." Zara looked at him, brow furrowing in confusion. "What do you mean?" "The artifact," Elias muttered, rubbing his temples. "I didn't just stumble onto it by chance. It chose me. And now Carrick wants it for himself. But why? Why does a warlord like him want an ancient human relic?" Zara's expression darkened. She had seen Carrick's brutality firsthand. He was more than just a conqueror. He was a collector of power, and nothing escaped his grasp for long. "We need to find out what it is," she said. "The artifact might hold the key to everything. The galaxy's fate, the past, and maybe even the future of humanity. We need answers." Elias knew Zara was right, but the weight of what she was suggesting sank deep into his chest. The relic was more than just a weapon. It was part of a history long buried, one that had been forgotten by the very people who had once wielded its power. He had no idea how it worked, but he knew it was connected to something vast, something that reached back to the golden age of humanity's rule over the stars. "Get me access to the old archives," Elias ordered. "The ones we've kept hidden." Zara nodded, tapping commands into the console. A moment later, a map of New Earth's deep vaults appeared on the screen, filled with forgotten databanks and classified histories. They had kept it secret, buried under layers of protection. The vaults were said to contain fragments of humanity's greatest secrets, pieces of lost technology, war strategies, and maybe even records of the empire that had once reigned. As the team made their way to the vaults, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. The strange visions he had experienced when first wielding the artifact were still fresh in his mind, flashes of a past that felt more like a warning than a history. There were secrets here, ancient, dangerous truths that Carrick would stop at nothing to uncover. When they arrived at the vault, Elias hesitated for a moment. The door stood before him, an imposing monolith of steel and encrypted security, as if it could sense his uncertainty. The key to unlocking it was inside his mind. The power of the artifact was the only thing that could open it now. He closed his eyes and let the relic's energy flow through him. The connection was instantaneous, the vault's locks unraveling like threads before the artifact's force. The heavy door groaned open, revealing rows upon rows of data storage pods. Elias moved quickly, searching for anything that might hold the answers they needed. At the back of the vault, he found what he was looking for: a data crystal, ancient and chipped at the edges. Its surface was inscribed with strange, unreadable symbols. The artifact pulsed, reacting to its presence. "This is it," Elias said, his voice low. Zara stepped forward, her eyes alight with curiosity. "What does it say?" Elias held the crystal up to the light, scanning it with the artifact's power. The symbols on the crystal began to shift, revealing a hidden message, one that was both chilling and illuminating. "It's a record," Elias said, eyes widening as the message played out. "It's a message from the past, humanity's lost empire." The voice on the crystal's recording was unmistakable, a cold, calculated tone that Elias could almost hear in his own mind. It was a message from a time long forgotten, an era when humans had conquered the stars, only to fall into ruin. And at the end of the message, one final word echoed across time, a name Elias recognized all too well: Carrick. "He was once one of us," Elias whispered, the realization sinking in. The man who had become a tyrant, a warlord, had once been human. And now he was back, seeking the very power that had been lost with the fall of their empire. Elias turned to Zara, his expression hardening with newfound resolve. "We have to stop him. but we can't do it alone. The revelation had set the stage for a far more dangerous game than Elias had anticipated. Carrick wasn't just an enemy. They were bound by a shared history, and that history had been buried for a reason. Elias could no longer run from the past. And now, the past was coming to claim him. The weight of the revelation hit Elias harder than he expected. Carrick was human, born from the same civilization that had once ruled the stars with an iron grip. The galaxy's most feared warlord had once been part of the empire that had created the artifact. His rise from a fallen empire, a tyrant reborn, now made sense, but it also brought forth terrifying implications. Elias paced the command center, his hands clenched into fists, the crystal's contents still echoing in his mind. He wasn't always this monster, Elias muttered, the thought unsettling him. He was one of us, a soldier like me. He must have known the consequences of what he was doing. So why? Why did he choose this path? Zara, her face set in grim lines, leaned against the console, arms crossed. Power changes people. The galaxy has a way of warping even the most noble intentions. Carrick must have found something that gave him more power than even the old empire ever had. Elias glanced at the map of Carrick's fleet still displayed on the wall. The warlord wasn't just on New Earth's doorstep anymore. He was circling the galaxy like a predator, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. We can't keep reacting. We need a plan, something that gives us the edge, Elias said, his voice hardened with resolve. He turned to Zara. Is there anyone still alive who might know how Carrick was able to gain control of the artifact, or what he's really after? Zara nodded, her brow furrowed. I think I know someone, but it's risky. There's a faction of ancient human scholars, those who studied the old empire and its downfall. We could make contact, but they're in hiding, spread across several worlds that are now under Carrick's control. Elias stood still for a moment, the weight of the decision pressing on him. Going after these scholars meant stepping into Carrick's grasp, into the heart of enemy territory. The risk was enormous, but it was the only lead they had. Prepare a ship, Elias said, his voice steady. We're going after them. The command center was immediately flooded with activity as Zara and the rest of the crew scrambled to make preparations. Elias found himself in the thick of it, giving orders, overseeing their readiness. His mind, however, was elsewhere, fixated on the message left behind by the artifact and its link to Carrick. He couldn't shake the feeling that everything they had done, every battle they had fought, was leading to a final confrontation. They were chasing shadows, but Elias couldn't afford to be wrong. Soon, the ship was ready, a sleek vessel designed for speed and stealth, capable of slipping past Carrick's blockade and navigating the deadliest corners of space. As Elias boarded, the crew silently moved into their posts, an unspoken bond between them that was forged in the crucible of battle. They were more than just soldiers. They were a family, bound by the same goal. As the ship lifted off, Elias looked back at New Earth, his home, the last bastion of humanity. He was leaving it behind, but not for good. If they could succeed, they would return victorious. If they failed, the consequences would be catastrophic, not just for New Earth, but for the entire galaxy. We'll need more than just knowledge to defeat Carrick, Zara said as she joined Elias in the command chair. We'll need to understand how he harnessed the artifact's power. And if we can't do that, we'll be as helpless as everyone else. Elias met her gaze, his jaw tightening. Then we make sure we learn everything we can, even if it costs us. The ship cut through the stars, the familiar hum of the engines a comfort amidst the growing uncertainty. They were heading toward the scholars' last known location, an isolated planet deep within Carrick's territory. The odds were stacked against them, but Elias had faced worse, and he wasn't about to let the galaxy fall into the hands of a man who had once been human, a man who had now become its greatest threat. The storm was coming. The only question was whether they would be ready when it arrived. The dark expanse of space stretched before Elias like an endless void, But beneath it, the distant planet they were heading toward was a speck of light, one that flickered faintly like the dying embers of a long-forgotten fire. It was an isolated world, tucked away in the farthest reaches of Carrick's domain. No one had dared to visit it in years, for it was surrounded by a series of ghostly, dead moons, silent witnesses to a forgotten war. As the ship approached, Zora's voice crackled through the comms. "We're coming up on the planet's orbit. No sign of Carrick's ships yet, but we should be cautious. The whole sector is practically a trap." Elias nodded, watching the data stream scroll across the screen. "Keep us in stealth mode. We need to be ghosts." The ship's stealth systems hummed to life, and the bright lights of the planet below dimmed as they became part of the darkness, invisible to all but the most sophisticated scanners. They descended slowly, the surface of the planet slowly becoming visible. Barren deserts, towering mountain ranges, and ancient ruins scattered across the landscape. It was a place of mystery, one that spoke of great loss and untold secrets. Elias could feel the weight of history pressing down on him. This was a place that had been touched by the rise and fall of humanity's greatest empire. Whatever they found here could change everything. The landing was smooth, the ship touching down in a forgotten valley surrounded by towering spires of rock. A thick silence enveloped the area, broken only by the soft hum of the ship's engines as they powered down. Elias and Zara stepped off the ship, their boots sinking slightly into the fine dust of the planet's surface. The air smelled of ancient stone, like a tomb waiting to be explored. "This place, it's too quiet," Zara whispered, her voice tense as she scanned their surroundings. Elias could feel it too, the eerie stillness that clung to the air, as if the planet itself was holding its breath. The ruins they had landed near seemed to stretch out in all directions, crumbling but still imposing. He could sense the weight of centuries pressing down on this place. This was no ordinary sight. This was where humanity's secrets were buried. A crackling noise came through Elias's comm, cutting through the quiet like a blade. "This is Alaron," the voice said, one Elias hadn't heard in years. Alaron was one of the last remaining scholars of the old empire, a historian who had once worked with the highest circles of the government. He was also a key part of the faction that had studied the artifacts and their true power. "Alaron," Elias asked, his voice steady despite the sudden rush of emotion. "Where are you?" "I'm here, close by," the voice crackled. "The location you've come to isn't safe. Carrick's forces have been watching. We need to move quickly." Elias's heart skipped a beat. "What do you know about Carrick and the artifact?" he asked urgently, his eyes scanning the desolate landscape. "I know more than you can imagine," Alaron replied. "But you need to get to me first. I've left a trail, but there are things here that even you can't understand yet. Follow the ancient pathways, the ones hidden beneath the surface. The answers lie there. But hurry, Carrick is closer than you think." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving Elias with more questions than answers. Carrick's reach was growing ever closer, and time was running out. Zora glanced at him. "Ancient pathways. What do you think he means?" Elias didn't answer immediately, his mind racing. The ruins around them were more than just remnants of an ancient civilization. They were a map, a guide to something hidden beneath the planet's surface. He had no idea what they would find down there, but it was clear that they were on the edge of discovering something monumental. "Whatever it is," Elias said, his voice firm, "we have no choice but to follow. It's the only chance we have of stopping Carrick." The team geared up quickly, moving through the ruins with purpose. Elias led the way, his instincts guiding him as they carefully navigated the labyrinth of ancient stone structures. With each step, the sense of history grew stronger, as though the very ground beneath their feet was alive with the memories of those who had walked before them. The deeper they went, the more it felt as if they were being drawn into the heart of a long-lost secret, one that had been buried, perhaps for good reason. The walls seemed to whisper with the weight of untold stories. And somewhere beneath the surface, the answers they sought waited, hidden in the dark. But as Elias continued to lead his team, he couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. There was something watching them from the shadows, something ancient, something waiting for them to uncover the truth. The deeper they ventured into the ruins, the more oppressive the silence became. The ancient pathways stretched before them like an intricate web, winding beneath the surface of the planet. The walls were carved with symbols and depictions that Elias could barely comprehend. This was a place built by a long-lost humanity, their mastery of technology, and the arcane seeming like the stuff of legends. Yet there was something else, something darker hidden within the stone. Elias couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking through a forgotten tomb, not just of a civilization, but of a history that had been deliberately erased. Every step echoed through the halls like a whisper from the past, warning them of the dangers that lay ahead. Zara moved cautiously beside him, her hand hovering near her weapon. "This place, it doesn't feel right," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The walls, they're not just ancient. They're alive. Like they're waiting." "I know," Elias muttered, his gaze flicking from one shadowed corner to the next. The air felt thicker down here, as if it were closing in around them. He knew that whatever they were about to uncover would change everything. And it would not be a simple discovery. Ahead, the tunnel opened into a vast chamber, one that looked as though it had been carved into the very core of the planet. Its walls were adorned with intricate murals, telling stories of a once proud civilization that had ruled the stars. But these murals were not just historical depictions. They were warnings. Elias could see them now, ominous figures, tall and shadowy, their eyes glowing with malevolent power. The images seemed to shift as if they were alive, following his every movement. "This is it," Elias said, stepping forward with a mixture of awe and dread. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He wasn't just uncovering a part of the past. He was unlocking the final chapter of humanity's rise and fall. The answers we're looking for are here. Zara stepped closer, her eyes scanning the murals. "These figures," she murmured, pointing at one in particular. "They look like shadows, like Carrick's army." Elias nodded slowly. "That's not a coincidence. Whatever Carrick is searching for, it's tied to this place, and to these figures. They're not just myth. They're real." The mural in question depicted a towering figure, draped in shadows, standing over a vast cityscape. Below the figure, smaller images of human soldiers, their faces filled with fear and awe, looked up at it. The figure seemed to draw power from the planet itself, and at its feet, the broken remnants of the old empire lay in ruin. "This was the beginning of the fall," Elias murmured, feeling the weight of history press upon him. The artifact, it wasn't just a tool. It was the key to something far darker. "Elias." Zora's voice trailed off as she approached a stone pedestal in the center of the chamber. Resting on it was another artifact, this one pulsing with an eerie, unnatural light. Unlike the relic he had uncovered earlier, this one seemed to be in perfect condition, as though it had been waiting for them all this time. Without thinking, Elias stepped forward, reaching out toward the artifact. The moment his fingers brushed its surface, the room seemed to tremble, and the air hummed with an ancient energy. His vision blurred, and a wave of unfamiliar images rushed through his mind. Images of Carrick's rise, his fall, and the twisted power he had drawn from this very place. The voice of Eleron echoed in his mind. "The artifact binds all things. It holds the power to reshape the galaxy, but it is not meant to be wielded by one alone. It is a burden, a curse, a legacy that demands more than just a ruler. It demands a sacrifice." Elias gasped, pulling his hand back. The vision faded, but the sense of dread remained. "That wasn't just a warning," Elias said, his voice tight. "It was a prophecy. Carrick, he knows this. He has to." Zara looked at him, her eyes wide with realization. "Carrick's been following this prophecy all along. He's been searching for power. This power. Elias's mind raced as he pieced together the fragments of what he had just seen. The artifact was more than just a weapon. It was a force, a catalyst capable of reshaping the entire galaxy. But at what cost? And why had Carrick gone so far to find it? Before he could voice another thought, a low rumble shook the chamber. The walls trembled, and a strange mechanical hiss echoed through the air. The ceiling began to crack, and dust rained down from above. "It's a trap," Elias growled. "We've triggered something." The ground beneath them shifted, and a massive stone door slowly began to open, revealing a hidden chamber. But inside was not just more ruins. It was a vast network of ancient machines, each one glowing with the same energy that pulsed through the artifact. Zara raised her weapon, her voice tense. "This is no ordinary tomb. Whatever Carrick's been after, it's here, and now we've awakened it." Elias felt the weight of the decision he had just made. They had uncovered the truth, but now they had no choice but to face the consequences. The galaxy's fate was about to change, and Carrick would stop at nothing to control it. The chamber quaked again, this time with more force. The walls groaned as if the planet itself was awakening from a centuries-long slumber. Elias's heart pounded in his chest as the ancient machinery hummed to life, its eerie glow brightening by the second. "Get ready," Elias shouted, pushing forward. He could feel the presence of something immense, something far beyond their understanding, pressing in from all sides. The artifact in his hand pulsed violently in sync with the machinery. Whatever this place was, whatever it had been built for, it was no longer dormant. Zara took position next to him, weapon raised and scanning the chamber for threats. "This isn't just a trap," she said, her voice laced with urgency. "This is a trigger. It's activating something far worse than we expected." Elias didn't need to hear more. He knew what was happening. The visions, the strange sensations that had flooded his mind moments earlier, it was all coming together. The artifact, whatever it was, had triggered the planet's defenses. They weren't just intruders. They were trespassers in a war that had never truly ended. "We have to shut it down," Elias muttered, staring at the shifting walls. "Find the core. It's the only way to stop this." They moved quickly, navigating through the room's maze of glowing consoles and ancient terminals, the lights flickering as the ground shook beneath them. The air was thick with a low, buzzing hum, the energy from the machines pulsating through every inch of the chamber. Suddenly, the far wall cracked open, revealing a massive opening. From it emerged a monstrous mechanical construct, its silhouette hulking and massive, covered in ancient armor that seemed to have grown into the very stone of the planet. Its eyes flickered with an eerie cold light, and it raised its massive arm, revealing the gleaming weapons embedded within it. "We've awakened the Guardian," Zara breathed, her voice barely audible over the rising noise of the machinery. Elias took a step back, adrenaline flooding his veins. The Guardian was no ordinary construct. It was an ancient war machine designed to defend the artifact at all costs. This was not just a defense mechanism. It was a weapon of the old empire, and it had no mercy. Before he could issue a command, the Guardian's massive fist swung toward them with the force of a starship's hull. Elias barely had time to dive to the side, rolling out of the way as the ground where he had been standing cracked open under the blow. "Move," Elias shouted. He grabbed Zora's arm, pulling her behind a massive pillar as the Guardian turned its attention to them, its glowing eyes narrowing. Zora fired her weapon at the Guardian, but the blasts ricocheted harmlessly off his armor. "It's invulnerable." Elias's mind raced. There had to be a weakness, something, anything they could exploit. Then he saw it, the chest of the Guardian, where the armor was thinner, almost translucent, pulsed with the same energy as the artifact. "The core," Elias shouted. "That's where the power is. If we can get to it, we might be able to shut it down." The Guardian swung its weapon again, and this time Elias was ready. He ducked and rolled, grabbing Zara by the wrist and pulling her forward, narrowly dodging the crushing blow. They moved quickly, their footsteps pounding as they ran toward the Guardian's exposed core. Each movement was calculated, each step measured. If they hesitated for even a second, they would be crushed. With a final, desperate leap, Elias launched himself toward the Guardian's chest. His hands found purchase on the exposed energy core, and he pressed his palm against it, feeling the raw power surge through him. "Zara," he shouted. "Now." Zara fired her weapon directly at the core, her shots hitting with perfect precision. The explosion sent a shockwave through the chamber, and the Guardian's glowing eyes dimmed as the energy system powering it short-circuited. The massive construct shuddered, then collapsed to the ground with a deafening crash. The silence that followed was overwhelming. Elias's chest heaved as he tried to catch his breath, his body still on high alert. They had only bought themselves a moment. The chamber continued to hum, the walls still shifting, but now it was clear there was something else at play. "This isn't over," Zara said, her voice grim. "We've just activated something else." Elias stood, looking down at the fallen Guardian. "We've made it angry. Whatever it is, it's coming." As if on cue, a deep, resonating voice echoed through the chamber, filling every corner with its oppressive force. "You dare to disturb the slumber of the First Empire. You shall not leave this place alive." The voice was not mechanical, nor was it entirely human. It was ancient and terrible, an intelligence far older than anything Elias had ever encountered. He knew, without a doubt, that it wasn't just the Guardian they had awakened. They had disturbed something far more dangerous. Carrick's shadow loomed over them still. And this was only the beginning. The voice echoed through the chamber, a ripple of ancient power that seemed to distort the very air. Elias's heart raced as the ground trembled beneath their feet, the walls shifting as if the entire planet was alive, reacting to their presence. The shadowy voice came again, deep and resonant, like the rumblings of a forgotten god. "You dare to challenge the First Empire. You shall not leave this place alive." Elias clenched his fists, his breath coming in quick gasps. The voice had the same eerie quality as the Guardian, but this was different. It was more than just a machine. It was a consciousness, a being of unimaginable power, something older than any empire, older than humanity itself. They had disturbed a force far beyond their comprehension. "We need to leave," Zora said, her voice tight with fear, but Elias shook his head, determination hardening his gaze. "No, we came here for a reason," he said, his voice steady despite the rising chaos around them. "We have to finish this. Carrick is already on his way, and if we don't stop this thing now, there won't be a galaxy left to save." The air shimmered, and suddenly, the walls of the chamber began to recede, revealing an enormous open expanse, one that seemed to stretch on forever. In the center of the room stood an immense figure, its silhouette cloaked in shadows. A massive throne, impossibly tall, loomed behind it, a symbol of an empire long destroyed. The figure raised its hand, and the ground cracked open beneath their feet. "You are insignificant," the voice boomed, now coming from the figure itself. "The legacy of the First Empire shall never be forgotten. You will join the others who sought to challenge it, burned and broken." Elias's mind raced. This being, this ancient ruler, had once controlled the galaxy with unimaginable power. And now it had been waiting, hidden beneath the surface of a dead world, for someone like him, to awaken it. "I don't care about your empire," Elias said, his voice cold with resolve. "We're not going to let you finish what Carrick started." With a wave of its hand, the figure summoned a wave of energy that sent the air crackling with power. Elias barely had time to react, diving to the side as the energy blast tore through the ground where he had been standing. The force sent debris flying in every direction, and the ground beneath their feet splintered. Zara fired her weapon, but the shots disintegrated upon impact with the figure's energy field. Elias's pulse quickened. This wasn't just an enemy to fight. This was an ancient force, a relic of an age that no longer belonged to the galaxy. But Elias was no ordinary man. He was a reluctant hero, and he had fought too many battles to back down now. He gritted his teeth and looked around, seeing the energy pulses crackling through the air, threatening to tear them apart. He knew there was only one way to defeat this thing: the artifact. He reached down to his side, feeling the weight of the strange relic he had taken from the chamber. The same artifact that had triggered this awakening. He could feel its power thrumming through him, resonating with the energy in the room. The artifact was not just a weapon. It was the key to understanding the force that powered this place. "Zara!" Elias shouted, his voice desperate. "The artifact. We need to channel its energy together." Zara nodded without hesitation, already sprinting toward him. She knew exactly what he meant. They had to use the power of the artifact against the being in front of them. The energy of the ancient empire was tied to this place, and to this artifact. But to harness it, they would have to risk everything. As Zara reached his side, Elias placed the artifact in her hands. Together, they activated it, the ancient energy swirling around them in an explosion of power. The chamber around them groaned as the forces of the old empire began to tremble, the very air crackling with intensity. The figure before them seemed to recoil, its form flickering as the energy from the artifact tore through the walls of the chamber. Elias could feel the dark force, the ancient consciousness, trying to fight back, to reclaim its hold over the galaxy. But Elias was stronger. His resolve was stronger. He had fought for humanity, for the freedom of every soul in the galaxy, and he wasn't about to lose it now. With a final powerful push, the artifact's energy erupted, flooding the chamber with blinding light. The figure's form began to disintegrate, the ancient power unraveling before them. The throne, the shadowy empire, it all crumbled to dust. The explosion of light sent a shockwave through the entire planet, shaking the foundations of the ruins and ripping apart the defenses that had held the ancient entity in place for millennia. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. The glowing energy of the artifact began to fade, leaving Elias and Zara standing in the aftermath. The chamber was still, the oppressive weight of the ancient force now gone. "We did it," Zara whispered, her voice filled with awe. Elias stared at the ruins around them, his heart still pounding in his chest. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. Carrick would still come, and the galaxy was still in peril. But Elias had proven something in that moment. He was no longer just a reluctant hero. He was the one who would shape the future, and he would not let the darkness rise again. "Let's go," Elias said, turning toward the exit. "We've got a galaxy to save."